Welcome to the Complexio podcast. In this special 3-part series, we take a deep dive into the technology behind Complexio, the intelligence layer that connects systems, people, and processes across the enterprise. In part 2, we move from understanding to action, exploring how Complexio is redefining automation through intelligence that learns and adapts. Danny Lange, president of Complexio, and Sean Edmiston, chief scientist and co-founder, explain how automation transforms when AI learns from the way organizations operate to reduce repetition and amplify the work that truly matters. Together, they reveal how this new generation of automation evolves through context and behavior to create systems that improve themselves over time. Well, because the business has got to where they are because they have run the business the way that they do business, correct? So if you have someone coming external saying, no, you should be doing it this way, it won't mesh, it won't work in the long run, and you will probably go back to something that you were doing before.
Absolutely. We talk at Complexio, we make a distinction between simple repetitive tasks and complex recurring tasks. So simple repetitive tasks are things that I can get trained to do in maybe a week. Maybe I can be a call center operator. Maybe I can be something else. But the process of training that is relatively simple. But when we look at the high value work being done, what is the work that really drives a business, real businesses such as Hafnia that we're working with now? We look at the work that's really driving some of these large enterprises that we're working with today. And it's not the simple repetitive tasks. It's very easy to hire more people in my call center. The tricky bit is the work of the experienced professionals. It's the finding enough experienced people who understand the nuance of my business. That's the limit on so many businesses to be able to actually grow and scale, is where they get those experienced people. And when you look at what those people are doing, they're doing complex recurring jobs, not simple repetitive tasks. And that's really the space that Complexio is in. How do we help these experienced people do complex recurring tasks and help them do their job better so the businesses can grow?
Well, I would actually like to add to that as we use AI to increase automation, it actually means that the employees in the organization will be able to do what humans are actually best at, which is to interact with other humans. There will be more time to interact with the customers. There will be more time to understand what kind of product improvements the customer need, rather than sitting and doing all the busy work. So there will be a change of jobs, and jobs will be more meaningful.
Absolutely.
Which would be something I think everyone listening very much looks forward to, from the employee to the manager, as you referred to, Sean. And that paints a picture of why this ability to capture that in-between work is so transformative. But what can be done once, going off of the thought that you just raised, Danny, like what can be done more from an enterprise once they have this captured and this picture exists of the business?
When you free up resources to do the things that really matter. Issuing an invoice, if you think about issuing an invoice, if you start thinking about all the work that went before this ability to issue the invoice, there may have been actually thousands of actions before that. Yeah. The invoice is just the end result. And it's understanding that long chain of activities and optimize it that will really, lift businesses up to the next level.
One part of it is about helping these people or saving some time for those people, taking away some of those recurring tasks from them. But the other piece is actually giving these experienced people even greater and richer context for the tasks they need to do. So when we look at this shared understanding that we've built with our knowledge graph, the ability to give those experienced people even richer, relevant data from across bigger parts of the business. So no longer are they limited to just the information they know from their own team or just the information they know from their own experience, but they can leverage the information from the collective experience of the entire business.
Yes, which is huge because we are working all over the world. Complexio is a lot of remote work, for example, in its own self, but all of these companies that are all over the world, and then within the same office, even the same location, you have departments that are siloed. And How long roughly does it take once you begin this process? How long until you start to see the early results of the understanding part? And then moving on from that, how do you move from the understanding of the business then into action?
Yeah, so for us, we're looking at these complex recurring patterns. So, we look at a minimum of 3 months of data. We look at any business, you go, I need at least 3 months to see in 3 months, if something's happened every week, I can see that 12 times. If something's happened every month, I can see that 3 times. Now, we can process that 3 months of data within a couple of days. So once a system is set up and installed, it's really within a couple of days we have that first understanding of the business. From there, we can start delivering value almost straight away, in terms of insights, in terms of understanding. Even just exposing this knowledge graph, that shared understanding, provides a business the ability to have a window into the difference between what people are actually doing and what they say they do, or what they even think they do. Because we all know that our own recollection of everything we've done every day is imperfect. If I get asked, where did I spend all my time yesterday? I'll have a rough idea, but I won't know in detail. So the first value people see out of our system is actually this window into what's this difference between what I think is happening across the business and where the time is actually going. And that value can pop out very, very quickly once we have this 3 months of data. The next step beyond those insights is these automations, is how we look at individual activities that are happening within the business and can propose to people improvements to make that job a little bit easier tomorrow. So sometimes we talk about the fact that our entire system is fully automated. So everything at this point, there's no analysts, there's no consultants. It's just plug it in, look at the data, build this meaning and understanding. And so we're able then to tackle problems that look too small to some people to tackle. But because we can do that in automated fashion, we can make these people's job a tiny bit better tomorrow. Sometimes we talk about solving a $1 problem. You're not going to have a whole army of people just to solve one problem. But if it comes from our automated system, there's something about my job, $1, 1 minute at a time, I saved automatically. The next day, another minute. Next day, another minute. And this compounds over time. So the value of the system continues to compound the longer it operates. Because the longer it operates, it has more context. The longer it operates, it's been able to introduce more of these small automations that make people's life a little bit easier. And the value to the business, effectively compounds.
And this that you referred to previously, Danny, as the long tail of work, everything that happens and that people currently are not looking at addressing, because as you said, Sean, if it's a $1 problem, you're not going to put consultants on it. You're not going to do that. But solving them does elevate everything for everyone within the business. And I presume also, because what you just said, the system learns from itself. So every workflow that is being proposed now is completely in alignment with how that business is doing business and how workflows normally happen within that, rather than, as we were saying earlier, someone comes in and says, this is how you should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other things that our system allows, because it is fully automated, because it's continuously monitoring how these things are happening, it's able to adapt as people adapt. Businesses are not static things. Any business today is a living, breathing, organic, collection of people and systems and customers and all the rest of that come together to get this thing done. A lot of times people view that through this sort of world of consultants or static analysis of my business. They'll come up and say, this is how we do things, and they'll write the document and it will stay that way for the next 10 years. And that's not reality. The reality is this very organic thing. And our system, because it's fully automated, because it's sitting there, it's watching how people are actually doing their job all the time, our system is able to adapt and evolve as people adapt and evolve, as the details of these, each of the activities subtly changes over time. We can respond to that.
What was your impression of that, Danny, once you came on board and saw this adaptive automation happening?
Yeah, I think that you already brought up the long tail. So there's the long tail, which really explain a lot of the complexities that's actually built into a large organization, and then there's this feedback loop. When you start changing processes, people change as well, and there will be all kinds of optimization taking place. And I think it's crucial that the system keeps monitoring how processes are being carried out in an organization. We tend to think, and that's also when we hire consultants to come in. We tend to think about an organization being sort of a very static beast, but in reality, we all know deep inside that that's not the case. There's a lot of adaptation taking place, and I think it's one of the fascinating things about Complexio is this constant monitoring and constant adaptation to the real work environment.
So we talk about this as the automated automations engine, but automated automations for someone not in tech, that sounds very, first of all, I think you get a little bit intimidated by the sound of it, but can you go through, we have already mentioned it, but what does it mean in practice? How automatic is it truly?
Like if I give a somewhat simplified example, imagine I'm a sales executive who needs to do a weekly sales report, and every week I have to sit down at my computer and I have to open the same report template. I have to go to the same database and copy and paste the same numbers into the same bit of the table, and then I have to write my little comment next to it, and I have to do those 4 or 5 actions every week. Now today, that executive, he could be being paid $500,000 a year, and he still has to do that work every week. Maybe someone comes along, some consultant comes along and says, I'm going to build a solution for that. And they spend 6 months and build some amazing, piece of enterprise software to solve that one specific problem. But that's a very sort of slow, laborious, slow manual way of solving this problem. But instead, if, through the Complexio system, it's looking and seeing those behaviors and activities every week. I mentioned before, providing the right information, in the right context. So the next week, as soon as that executive opens the template to say paste in the report, our system has seen that the next thing he always does, he goes and grabs this particular database, runs this particular little bit of filter, and copies and pastes. And the system just says, well, do you want me to do that for you? I've seen you do that every week for the last 12 weeks. Let me do that little bit for you. And that's how automation starts. It's things that are already happening that just get better and better every week. And that executive now can actually focus on the meaningful bit of that job, which was his commentary, his insight, and focus on that component of the report rather than the copy, paste, and data filtering.
Yeah, which sounds amazing to have a system that actually works with you, not against you or you having to go. Yeah, the constant switching between programs and tools is, I think, what gives most employees fatigue at the end of the day rather than actually what they're doing. So having something that proposes that and moves the work along for you is huge.
Absolutely.
Why has this previously automation programs, they kind of plateau? Is that due to the fact that it doesn't have this understanding that Complexio has, or what would you attribute that to?
I think I attribute it to the fact that previously, in order to do that, you've had to develop a very static view of how that process works. And so if I have 2 executives who do that process slightly differently, I end up having to agree on some common middle ground between those 2 things and then make both people follow that third way of doing things in order to benefit from an automated system. So someone will come along with a little dashboard and say, if you copy and paste this number in here and then post this, then the system can do this bit for you. But, that's not how people really work. Everyone will have their own ways of doing this, especially when we're in this realm of these experienced professionals doing complex recurring tasks. So you need a system that's able to see and understand and work with that diversity, work with the difference between those 2 people, and actually help each of them in those slightly different ways that make sense to them. One of the important insights the Complexio system gives is understand the difference between the activity and the outcome. So there's a difference between, the exact sequence those executives want to construct those reports and the quality of the outcome, the quality of the reports, the meaning of those reports to that business. Now, every other automation approach just focuses on the process. They go, well, if we follow the same process every time, we will get the same outcome. But it's not actually true. What we need is an understanding that the outcome that we need, to continue that example, is real insight from those reports. The outcome we need is faster understanding of subtle movements in the market that those sales executives are tapping into. And if we understand that's the outcome and the system is focused on helping people get that, it becomes less important if they do it in slightly different ways.
Yeah, and so I guess it's kind of back to that understanding of exceptions and how you work alongside them, and also recognizing patterns, which you mentioned, Danny, in the way that you work. But is there anything that you would like to add to what Sean just mentioned?
I would like to mention that process automation is something that has been worked on for the last 15 years. There are some big players in that space. They have done some good work, but it's really founded on very traditional software engineering. It's founded on consultants coming in, mapping out, processes as they see them from talking to people, and then software engineers writing very deterministic, very rigid programs that basically, will ask people to type some data in, and it will produce some documents, store it in a database, send an invoice to someone when all the data is complete, etc. It's very mechanical, yeah? And that has been sort of the state of the art. But then a couple of years ago, something happened to AI, and modern AI is large language models are able to interpret threads of emails and understand the intent, the challenges, the exceptions happening between, in the process when people interact. That puts us in an entirely new situation. Yeah, we don't have to have consultants in and analyze and interview and try to distill complex processes into something very simple that can be implemented by a software engineer. So large language models give us this new ability to summarize complex interactions, automatically. And then secondly, we have to remember there's the second half of modern AI, which is the generative AI, which now allows this AI to actually generate code, not having software engineers write it, but generate code that solves these very specific workflows. And I think when you put that together, it's a complete disruption driven by modern AI, complete disruption to the field of RPA and process automation.
Yeah, which is very exciting. I can imagine someone listening right now is going a little bit, okay, but if the system is watching everything that we do, it has an understanding of everything that we do, it can tell us how to do it. How do you ensure that there's compliance when the automation design is being designed by the program?
I think it's very important to sort of remind yourself that AI can't go to jail. AI can't really be fired. Yeah, you can turn it off, but it doesn't really care. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we, the humans, the organization, are responsible. So humans have to oversee the entire process. You can't say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, AI did this." No, you have to take responsibility. And again, we're talking a bit about changed roles. I think that in many ways we should see these AI systems being introduced as almost as employees. Yeah, we are basically gonna watch over them. We are gonna see if they do things the right way, and if they don't, we are gonna step in.
I think there's a really interesting role here for transparency, and there's an interesting role for interpretability. One of the common questions people raise around some uses of AI is big black boxes. We put stuff in, we don't really understand what's happened on the inside, and we get stuff out. Now, Complexio does use very advanced generative AI. We do use some of those models, but the thing that we do is that I touched on this before, we look at each thing from lots of different angles. What that does, we're able to actually have a level of granularity of understanding about how the model is actually coming to these decisions. We have some observability, so we can say that this particular automation was based off these particular data points, for example. So I think when you combine that with transparency, with the ability to people to understand exactly what data has been ingested into our system, we talked about ingestion before, where we read in these different data points. I think that to me is the key around the compliance issue. Once you have transparency and interpretability, you then have the tools to ensure that you are compliant.
And we have to remember that employees, that people are black boxes too.
Yep.
That we have to ask employees why they did something. What's the process behind this? And I can tell you that an AI is less offended if you start asking how it got to a certain result, and you maybe criticize it for that process and correct it. I constantly want to remind you all out there that AI has a lot of similarities how up to now have been dealing with employees as well.
Yeah, and it's not like the system will design something completely out of the blue. It's something that is based off of what it has seen, what it knows that you do. So it's not all of a sudden gonna kind of go berserk or decide on to do something completely new. It will be there. It knows how to automate things to help you. And there's also this element of human in the loop, right? So that, as you were saying, Danny, where our roles are shifting slightly. So you have to look at what is being proposed to you, not what is being said, this is how you should do it, or I'm going to do this either way.
That's a very good point. I do want to emphasize a small distinction here, which is there's human in the loop, which is you're part of the process, but there's also human on the loop, which is really overseeing the process. So you're not a bottleneck as a human. You're just overseeing it, ensuring that things are running the way they should. But it's not like you actually are an active participant in the process. And I think that is really what the future is going to bring.
Oh, that's a great distinction. And how does that look with Complexio system? You have to approve things, or how does the automations engine makes the human on the loop become viable?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way it works today, as we've talked about, our system is ingesting and mapping human behaviors and interactions as they're happening. And pretty much continuously, it's observing and identifying these small opportunities to help and assist people. And those get proposed as automated automations. So if I'm a user sitting at a desk, every week, for instance, I may see one or two little things pop up where the system has gone, I've seen you do this. Would you like me to do that for you next time? Approve or not approve? Do you want me to check with you every time I do it? So the system is configured so that the human has to approve every single time it does it. Or do you just want to see a report at the end of the week of every time I did it? And so you get that level of granularity. But because these things are framed in the way that makes sense to the person doing the job, it's very easy for them to understand what the system is doing. It's not like the person has to think differently about the job. Our system, the automations, use the language that the person uses the context that the person uses. So it becomes a very simple cognitive task. It's not a big cognitive burden, we say, on the user to understand what it is it's trying to do. It's small, specific things targeted at that activity or that outcome. And so then the user gets full control and potentially can disable it at some point in the future. Go, actually, I no longer want the system to do that thing for me. And we talked about the adaptiveness. So, next month, because the computer has started doing this one thing for me, the person will start doing something a little bit different. And so next month, the system might pop up a slightly different thing. Oh, well, I can now do this other little bit. And that process just continues, continuously compounding over time, as we spoke about before.
That concludes part 2 of Inside the Intelligence Layer. In the next and final part of this series, we look beyond automation to orchestration, exploring how Complexio connects every process, system, and outcome into one coordinated intelligence that drives the enterprise forward.